So, I mean, I'm gonna show some footage of the space, obviously, but I guess if anybody wants to see other sides of it, go to Atheneum.
Absolutely. What is the role of photography in building the memories?
Today's visit is in the studio of Hanna Råst,
Mhm.
studio and home together. And thank you for having me today.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you for inviting.
You are a photographic artist, but also a sculptor, or how do you define what you do?
Well, I guess I would define myself as a visual artist who works with multiple different materials and mediums. So I have a background in photography, but I work with lens-based media more widely, meaning moving image as well photography. But then on top of that, I also work with sculpture and text-based art as well.
It's nice always to talk with somebody who is not confined only to one medium, because I'm also like that. I like to do different things. Let's start maybe with the space itself.
Mhm.
How big is the workspace that you use, like as a studio?
I guess like my work corner is something like 10 to 15 square meters, but the whole apartment is approximately 58 square meters. And yeah, it's a studio or atelier apartment. It was built late 50s and was specifically designed for artists to work here. So this place has a long history that's throughout the timeline of this building, artists have been living here. And for example, someone who was, I think, the first artist who lived here, and he was a Finnish painter. He also painted this space, which you can see in Atheneum Museum, actually. So it's quite a nice reference, although like it's very abstract. So I guess you really need to see this space and then the painting in order to connect that it's the same space.
Is it in the current exhibition or in the permanent?
I think it is part of the permanent collection. So I think you should be able to see it even if you just go now. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm gonna show some footage of the space, obviously, but I guess if anybody wants to see other sides of it, go to Atheneum.
Absolutely.
How long have you been here?
For 5 years now. Yeah.
Well, 5 years is enough time for somebody to settle down and enjoy the space.
Absolutely. Yes. And I do love it. It's like somehow multifunctional space, although like, of course, it's a one big space, so it doesn't have this kind of separate workspace or separate workroom, which could be handy if you work with more messy materials. And as for example, when I work with sculpture, I feel like this is not the ideal space for that. So I need to either find a workshop where I can work, or a friend space, or I don't know, go to the countryside where I come from, to realize that kind of projects there. But this is still quite a flexible space for many kind of needs. And for example, a couple of years back, I did a big mobile artwork, and this is actually the only space where I could build it, because like back then, or at that time, I had a separate studio as well, but the room height was a lot more smaller than in here, so I couldn't build the whole mobile to the whole length at that space, but I had to actually do it in here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a bit tricky with works that you can't really see how they're gonna look like before the exhibition. So yes, but the lucky thing to have this. So you said you have had another studio. So what do you like more? Do you like the fact that this is like you can roll out of bed and in the studio, or like is it also good to take a commute to some other space?
Well, I think both of them have advantages. So I have worked from home before. In between, I had many different kind of experiences of studios, like having a studio underground in a bunker, or sharing the studio with other artists or having my own studio, but like in this kind of art community. So there was a lot of other artist studios in the same building, and we could have like a lunch together. And that's definitely something that I miss from that kind of a community, is that you can have other working professionals next to you and you can go and knock on the door and ask the person for lunch, or, hey, can I ask your opinion? Or like, there's also a lot of this kind of shared knowledge that you don't get this information from anywhere else, but like that are casually exchanged over a lunch or talks or a coffee cup or whatever. That's I find it very important. So when you work from home, you definitely lack with that aspect. And that's definitely something that I do miss. But right now it works quite well for me because I'm mainly working at the moment with big video projects. So I'm more working only from the computer. So then again, like that is quite well working when I do work from home. But now I need to be more active myself, that if I need an opinion, I need to call a colleague friend of mine and say like, hey, can we talk, or can you come here, or whatever. So I need to be more active in inviting the help to my place and not just like go and knock on someone's door.
Yeah, definitely. I usually used to ask people about the role of the community for them. Like, is it important or not so much? Because there are some artists who are okay to be more solitary. But I do believe that it's very, very crucial to have other people, peers around you, or like preferably close by.
I do agree that it's, if you are not like working in a community through the artist studio, then at least like having this kind of a network that you can use, and I don't know, invite your friend for a coffee over to your place and then discuss over the issue that you have on hand.
Yeah. Some people also have this like a small group of friends that they have these sessions of talking about the work, which it's amazing if one is able to have that. Okay, so what would you say is the most, like, your favorite part of this space?
I guess I have to say it's this couch that we are sitting on, actually. Even though, like, of course, the work corner is very important as well, but like actually this couch is a place where I combine many things. I come to rest here, but I also come to this couch to think or contemplate. I read on this couch, so I do many kind of things. So this couch has a very multifunctional,
I think that's from all the visits that I've had so far, it's very rare to be in a studio that doesn't have a couch.
Yes.
The couch is very important. Yeah, definitely. So I can totally understand the role of the couch. Somebody should do an artwork about it.
Yeah, somehow around the couch.
You mentioned you're not from Helsinki, you're from the countryside. How did your path go so that you end up here now as an artist?
Well, I grew up in the countryside in middle parts of Finland, and from quite little, I decided I wanted to be an artist. And then, in one point, I told my parents that I'm gonna go and study in an art school in Helsinki, and that's what I did. So basically, quite determined path to come to Helsinki and work as an artist was somehow very fixed idea for me. Of course, I sometimes question that was that a smart idea, but like still I'm with it and quite happy about it. So yeah.
Did they question that when you told them?
Well, I come from the background that my family or my parents were farmers, so they didn't have any relation to art or any connection to art. So it was quite and I guess to some level still is quite a bizarre profession. And so they were supportive, but they didn't have a clue what this is.
Whatever your art career behind you. Well, that's still something, you know. Yeah. That's pretty good to have.
Yeah,
kind of a support.
I think so.
And you studied, where did you study? Oh, you studied in Aalto.
Yes, I studied in the photography department in Aalto, or it was the University of Art and Design before. And then it turned to Aalto just when I was graduating. So yeah, that was the main hub. But it was still in Arabia, so not in Otaniemi as where it is now.
Yeah. How did you lean towards photography exactly? Like, what was your connection with photography for that?
That's a good question. I guess like when I was younger, I loved drawing a lot. So maybe through that, I discovered I wanted to be an artist. But then I come back to it quite often, that where did the inspiration to photography came from? And I guess like my grandfather was he wasn't a photographer, but he was a big enthusiastic as a hobby photographer. And I remember several kind of moments from my childhood when we were sitting in a dark room and my grandfather was showing these like dia projector images of photographs that he had taken from nature, from the trips that they had made, and so on. And I always find it very fascinating, this kind of idea of capturing moments, telling the story or narrative, somehow gathering memories and then like returning back to them. So I really love this kind of a notion that you somehow can evoke or bring back some memories that happened maybe just a little time ago or even longer time ago. And as well, the same with my parents, that even though like none of them were photographers, photography was very somehow present in our family life. So my parents were taking a lot of photographs and we have boxes and boxes and boxes of like family photos. So somehow it was very natural element or thing to do, like somehow in our family. So it was always there and present.
Yeah, that's not very common, I think, for those like past times before everybody had a camera in their pocket.
Yeah, I guess
so
not.
Don't take that many photos.
Yeah. So I'm somehow very happy and surprised that somehow my family, maybe it was through the grandfather who was very enthusiastic to photography, that then the cameras came to our house as well. I cannot with 100% certainty say this was the story, but maybe. So somehow
there's usually many things.
Yeah, that kind of affect. But yeah, it was somehow very present, and maybe that's one of the reasons. And somehow I always been very fascinated about these like relations of photography and memory together. So yeah, maybe that was the other connection.
So memory, is that the main thing you are focusing around?
I would say yes. I think like I'm quite, for a long time, I've been dealing with the topic of memory. I guess like also the passage of time, transience, trauma through different angles maybe. So I've been interested in memory from the psychological point of view, but also from, let's say, ecological or archaeological point of views as well. So somehow I think it's very flexible and universal topic that can cover quite many kind of point of views under it. So yeah, I would say that memory is somehow the main theme that I circle around or deal with.
Do you remember well? Like, do you have the memory?
No. I think I have a mediocre memory, so not totally bad. But for example, one of the main things that when I started to really do my practice was the interest towards the old photographs from my family. And when I was looking at myself as a younger person in the photographs, I couldn't remember the events. So I could only see myself in the photographs, but like it was a somehow blank space for me or a memory. And that got me interested in the idea that what is the role of photography in building the memories. And sometimes we actually do remember more the memories through the photographs than like that we have the actual memory. And of course, everyone knows that like every time when we remember, we rewrite the old memory. So it's always like this kind of like, do we even actually have the original memory of the moment anymore existing, or is it rewritten so many times? But now I'm getting to the side paths. But I feel like that somehow this role of photography was very interesting. And since I don't remember that well my own childhood, it was interesting to face these family photos and be like, why I don't recall any of these, or I had to ask my mom. And then maybe in some places I remembered that maybe my mom answered in a very different way, that, oh yeah, this was this one. And that was
I remember it was also
yeah, so also that was interesting, that how it's so subjective, that like everyone remembers their own point of view and from their own standpoint. So every memory is different, even if it's shared and in the same space. So that was somehow interesting, this collective aspect of it as well.
And you decided to go towards the art photography and not like a documentary, for example.
Yes. I guess for me, it never has been that inviting or like inspiring to work with the documentary photography. And during the school time, I was working more with pure like taking images with the camera. But I felt that after graduation, I felt that something was missing or it wasn't enough. So I always felt like I have the need to, I don't know, tear the photograph or look behind it or somehow extend it or expand it. So I guess
Sounds very familiar.
yeah, it's like it was somehow never enough. And I guess that was maybe stems from the fact that like when I was looking at the photographs from the past, like I felt it was just the surface and I always wanted to dive deeper somehow. So that kind of led me to work with photography more in the expanded way. So using it first with the collage and mixed media, but lately also with sculptural forms and three-dimensional forms, and somehow really flexing it and extending the idea of photography.
Yes, that was also my thought when I was graduating photography. It's funny how multiple people have the same issues with photography. There's something there. And then came the sculpture, and from what I saw, I mean, you have different sculptural objects that you've done in your practice, but there were at least several that were metal casts. How did that came to be, like, exactly? Because metal casting is a very particular thing.
Yeah, I've been doing metal casting here and there before, but particularly how I connected maybe the photography and metal casting was when I was doing residency in Copenhagen in Denmark. And when I was starting the program, they were asking for my wishes for the program. And I said that I have this wish that it would be really nice to work with metal and more with the sculptural forms. And they said that we could offer you to a possibility to work in the metal workshop with us. And of course, I really got excited and wanted to come back to that because I had done some metal castings before. And and then I wanted to somehow use the photographic materials such as the family photos or the film roll somehow as a starting point or as a base or mold for the metal, because like it's again like it's so, especially with the family photographs, which is so thin and paper and fragile, that how can I turn that into a metal cast was very inspiring and interesting to just try out. And it came out really well. Like 2022, I created a work called Weight of Memory, which is like a stack of family photographs casted in bronze. For that, I was very interested with the idea of using these like very thin photographs or photo paper and like creating a mass from them, and playing with the idea that like what kind of memories are heavy and like when to let go. So in the exhibition spaces, for example, it is participatory work, so you can also carry it in the space, and people can actually share the weight of memory. And it has really evoked a lot of like interesting discussions, because I think it really activates people to somehow contemplate on the topic of memories and what kind of when it's heavy, and how long should we carry them, and is it okay to just let them go, let it go somehow. So I really like that photographs have this kind of a character or ability to create, like, be this kind of a mediator somehow, so they can connect people to discuss over some topics, whether it's remembering or thinking about the weight or whatever topics. So I think they are always this kind of a great in-between negotiator between the audience and the artist, or even just family members.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the main things in art.
Yeah.
Generally, to provoke this kind of a conversation. So what are you working on right now?
At the moment, I'm working with a new project, which is more about structures of safety and shelter, and different kind of inner and outer threats and how we respond to them. And I work with a grant application funded by Kone Foundation. So for the 2 years, I have opportunity to just focus on this project, and I'm totally at the beginning. So at this point, I'm just absorbing a lot of information. I feel it's always a bit chaotic at the beginning. So sometimes I feel that I don't know yet what it's going to be in the end. Like I have an idea that I would like to create a video, but besides that, some sculptures, possibly some metal sculptures again. But I think like this starting point is always a bit chaotic, but that chaos is very necessary for the new ideas. And I think at this point, like when I do a lot of background research, I write a lot, I read a lot, I just consume, get inspired by different images. And this kind of gathering and accumulation of information somehow is very important, but most of it might be very useless for when you consider the outcome. So, but I think it's very necessary for the process to have this like overwhelming accumulation of ideas. It's necessary to form or create the form for your project or for your ideas in the end, to have this amount of chaos or accumulation of information.
So is that how your process usually goes? Like you do the research beforehand, and then you know what you should do, and then you start doing it?
Yeah, I would say that I always have like some sort of a frame or a framework that I use as a starting point. It might be like a found object or historical place or narrative, or like, for example, here for the ideas of shelter. And of course, like what's happening around us is
it's very topical, right?
Yeah, always affecting us. So of course, I'm always dealing somehow with something that I also react to, or that my surroundings or close people react to. But with this one, I was visiting the Danish coastline during my residency, and I encountered many bunkers from the World War II out on those coasts, and I got very inspired of the idea of like how shelter can, on the other hand, be protective, but it can also like be very exclusive and somehow like also like shut the other world outside and somehow protect. It has like a negative and positive aspects on it. So I guess through that I started to somehow develop this idea, and of course, like with the situation that we are now globally is also like very much affecting the topic that I'm dealing with. But yeah, so I would say that I somehow always start with the framework, and then I start doing background research, but I'm also very open to the process that I don't know where that research will lead me. So I also have to be somehow open and quite honest to it, and accept that maybe that was the starting point, but it might go to a totally different direction that I didn't expect to when I was starting it. So somehow I do like to have quite a lot of freedom to, I don't know.
Do you do multiple tests and experiments during that?
I do. And some, maybe like a lot of my works are also born or made through try and fail. So I also like try something, decide that, okay, it doesn't work, so I do it differently. So it includes a lot of like experimenting and testing.
Are you including the Finnish shelters? Because there's so many shelters here around the Helsinki itself.
Yeah,
probably throughout the country.
I think so. Yeah, at least at this point, I'm thinking that it should be included somehow. And I'm also interested in like not just human-made shelters, but also like what kind of shelters other species to create or use natural shelters. So like this idea of the structure or architecture of the shelter itself, like is very important. And we could even say that home is the one or the very basic base.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, that we all need. So yeah, even home can be included that.
Do you involve some other people in your work, friends or family, or?
With the video work, I have involved other people more. With the others, it's more objects, so obviously not that much in the making process. But yeah, in the video works, I have asked friends or friend of a friend or yeah, different people from my networks to collaborate.
You mentioned the Kone grant, so obviously now that is how you are going. But how do you generally sustain your practice? Like, have you always had grants, or have you had like had to do jobs?
Well, of course, the grants are never consistent. So I've been very fortunate to have like a longer like working grants lately. But at the beginning of my career, I had to work in a cafe or then after I started working as an art teacher for adults. So I was doing teaching in one point quite a lot. And I still do time to time give lectures or help like individual courses, but not that much because I've been, yeah, very lucky to have the grants at the moment. But of course, it's always this kind of a balance with the uncertainty that like you have a grant, then maybe you are lucky for or covered for 2 or 3 years. And then after that, like you might be unemployed for 1 year and then you get another like 2-year grant. So it's always this kind of a wavy, roller coastery kind of a life that you need to get used to. And it's sometimes quite hard or can be really stressful as well, because then you always need to think about those kind of down parts when you don't have a grant and how can you earn your living or make your income at those moments when you don't have any grants. So yeah, it's always this kind of a uncertainty and balance that you try to maintain with.
Yeah, a little bit like those entertainers in the circus that have like multiple plates on a stick, and
yeah,
you have to balance those plates so they don't drop.
Absolutely, it's always like a juggling many things at the same time.
Yeah. No, I mean I'm trying to ask everybody about how they manage to continuously be an artist, because I think that's not something that is talked about too much, and it should be. Because I find a little bit that it's almost like people don't want to talk about their side gigs, and I found that always very strange. Like, why? I mean, it's so natural that you would have to do other things, and it's completely fine to do that.
Yeah, no,
if you have to,
especially in Finland, because it's not so obvious that you can cover your living by selling your art. So I think artists are very dependent on the grant system and other jobs that they do. So it's always this kind of, and of course, if you work part-time or full-time in some other job, it always takes the time off from your art creating. So then it's always this kind of a balance that we struggle with. And I think, the income or how to earn a living as an artist is a hot topic that never, I don't know, goes away. So our artists really talk about it constantly, and we always talk about it with the colleagues as well, that like how to somehow survive in this kind of a world that is very precarious and how it's very uncertain, like the income. And so it is a struggle, and really skills that you need to develop during the time. And still, I don't know if I, at least like from my point of view, if I have developed, it's always I'm terrified when the grant ends and if there is no grant in the future. And again, you start applying, you get the rejection letters, and you thinking that, okay, this is not working and what can I do now? So it always has these like moments of desperation, I guess, in some way.
On the other hand, that makes you very resilient. And then
Yeah,
I know that there are people in other spheres that, you know, you have a job and that's your security, but there's always this like, oh my God, especially now, economy is bad, we're going to lose the job, what are we going to do? And some panic comes. But for artists, it's like, oh, well, this is something we know already, we're used to it.
and I think like, especially like when we think about the economic situation right now, I think more and more people are suddenly experiencing something similar that we do experience or have been experiencing as an artist for a long time. And it was the same during the pandemic as well, that suddenly a lot of people lost their jobs and couldn't apply for it, like couldn't get a job, and everything was suddenly like the income was gone for many people. So I felt that suddenly a lot of other professions were discovering the similar kind of situations that we've been dealing with for quite a long time. And I think we are, unfortunately, going more towards that kind of a world where it's precariousness is becoming more and more a common thing for many professions, not just for artists.
That is true, sadly. And sometimes that is one of the reasons why you get like this, like a stiff moment when you can't even work and you can't even do your project, whatever you're working on. Have you had such a, like, not necessarily caused by the resources, but like for whatever reason, did you ever had this kind of a creative block?
Yes, I have. Of course, sometimes, as we just talked, even like this kind of a stressful moments that being suddenly unemployed and not having any income, that can be very paralyzing somehow. But if we don't think about that side, even now as an artist and having a grant and being somehow covered or secured, I can experience artist blocks. And I think
you deal with them.
Yes, it's a good question. I think that sometimes I just need to then maybe give myself a pause. So just allow that, okay, we are not now progressing. Maybe I need to do something else, go for a holiday, meet some friends, do more sports, do other stuff, or pick up something that is like a little bit like how do you say, like fooling myself or tricking my mind somehow to think about something else, because I feel that when you have the block, you don't have the capacity somehow to wander in your mind, or like somehow you are stuck with something. So I think the important part is to somehow let your mind wander. And for me, actually, also just walking in the forest helps. So if you are blocked mentally or creatively, move. Go for a walk or run or swim or whatever. Like I feel sometimes this kind of a through the bodily movement can help. Maybe not always, but yeah.
Yeah, that's actually good advice. I'm not sure if anybody has given this side before, because I used to ask this question a lot as well. But that is definitely, in any case, very good thing to do, to move a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, like, and just maybe not scroll your phone or procrastinate there, but like just somehow, because blockage is something that is not moving, but I guess like then involving your body and like taking it to a walk and in the forest without phone, or somehow disconnecting from that can help. And or talk. Maybe that's the other part, that you can talk with someone, and it can, sometimes we cannot go with our minds to certain levels alone. So we need some help, and discussing with a friend or colleague can help quite a lot as well.
Yeah, this is again where the community comes to.
Absolutely.
You can see the role there. You mentioned the leaving the phone and just not paying attention to that, but I mean, apart from a creative block situation, we do have our phones like quite a lot, quite close to us. How do you do that, like with all the social media and your practice? And
I guess I have quite a complicated relationship with the social media and phones in general. I feel that they can be very destructive, very addictive. And if you have that blockage, or if you feel like, oof, I cannot, it's hard to grasp what I'm now doing or thinking it's so easy to just procrastinate on the phone. So I really do try to have limits to the use of my phone. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes not. So I also try to be gentle towards myself in that. But I think it's really important to have breaks from the phone and somehow try to limit the use. For me as well, like I feel I'm more active if I have an exhibition coming or if it's ongoing. I use the Instagram or other social medias more to advertise, make myself visible that, okay, I'm here. But like in between time, I really feel like I want to use it less, also just to keep my mind more fresh and be less destructive. But it's sometimes easier said than done.
Yeah, especially with all the. And I've noticed that when I see those reels of other artists doing their work, it's always fascinating for me. I like to watch those generally, but if you are in a moment of a crisis of your own, it's a bit. You get into this comparison mode, which is not something you want to do.
And I think for some artists, it's like it comes very naturally to use the phone and share the process and like somehow snippets of painting or I don't know from different parts of the process. But for me, it doesn't come naturally. So I don't feel like I want to use it that much for that. But then again, like I use my phone quite a lot to write a lot of notes. So I do keep it with me because like then again, it is the thing that we take with us everywhere. So it's also very handy for me to write down notes all the time because I like the idea of carrying a pen and a little notebook, but I never do that. So for me, the notebook is the phone. So yeah, I have to accept that.
Right before we started recording, you mentioned something that you are also doing interviews for the podcast ArtPod.
Yes, I am part of the collective. At the moment, less active than I used to be before. But I also did some interviews with other artists about like working as an artist and like with also about the studio, the meaning of the workspace, also like how with artists who are very tied to working in the studio and artists who don't work with the studios, and also like about the residency possibilities and so on. So it's been really fun I found it very interesting to do this kind of a podcast where I can invite also some colleagues and fellow artists to discuss about like also just like very mundane basic stuff. But I feel it's somehow important to open that for a bigger audience, like because I feel that it's still a little bit of a mystery for people who don't work in the art fields. That's how we work, or what is this?
And this is one of the goals of this podcast. But it was a big surprise. I didn't know that you are part of that. So we are like fascinated about it. And
I think was it last year or the year before we did a collaboration with the Art University with these keynote lectures. So I was one of those who was writing a kind of a essay based on those. So now I've been more on that side that we've been concentrating on doing collaborations. And then we have some new members who are more now concentrating on and doing podcasts about like art and money or income. So very important topics as well. So I think that's the latest podcast that we have had there. Yeah.
I tried to listen to this art pod once, like a long time ago, but it was in Finnish.
Yeah, I guess that's always the kind of a tricky part, that like what kind of what language you use. And we have Isabella Sudelius, who is an artist as well, and she is based on Berlin, and she's working quite a lot. Like when she's doing podcasts, she's mainly doing them in English. So we have one who is a little bit more representing the international scene, but otherwise we are unfortunately in Finnish.
Yeah, but you are a whole collective and doing very seriously those.
Yes, and I think because there's quite many of us, it's quite it works quite well because of course it's we don't get any funding for that, so everyone is bringing their own how to say, like we work as much as we can. So maybe for some years there are people who cannot do nearly nothing, and then there are other members who can do more, and then maybe in one point it turns the other way around. So it's kind of like a fluctuation or kind of flow that's, yeah, others are creating more content than the others, and then some other times the other way around. So I think, yeah, it has been working quite well.
Do you go to exhibitions often?
I think it goes in paces, so, or it's kind of a waves. So when I'm in the middle of my own research or art making processes, I tend to go less. But then when I just have done the exhibition and maybe I want to have a little bit of a break from my own practice, that's probably when I'm more active in going to the art exhibitions. I would love to do that more, but somehow, yeah, lately I haven't been in as many as I would like to.
If you are in the research phase, as you mentioned in this new project of yours, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Also because like I guess like I don't want to, it's the same as with the social media that I try to avoid browsing it too much, because I feel that it might distract me, and I feel that somehow even seeing exhibitions can somehow distract me from the thought processes that I have with my own practice at the moment. So sometimes it's really important to me to block a lot of.
You don't want to get influenced by other.
No.
Right. Interesting.
I mean, I love it, but at the same time, I guess I want to a little bit protect my own development of the processes. So it's really like somehow connected to also the pace where I'm at. So especially at this point when I'm like very, maybe I could say a fragile state somehow. So I want to just be with myself. And then in some point when I'm more like kind of already rolling and maybe producing the works and so on, then I'm kind of more open and interested in seeing what other people are doing. But right now I just want to nest, be in my own shelter of my practice.
Fair enough. Sure. Yes. Why not? So when do you gather inspiration otherwise, if you are avoiding seeing the art?
Well, like I said, of course, I'm not totally plugged from the social media, but I still try to limit the use of that. But I get a lot of inspiration from literature. So I read a lot. And I love it. And I go and see movies as well. So that is one of for example, I really loved many of the documentary movies that were now seen or shown in Dog Point Festival. So I also like to maybe a little bit explore other fields than visual art. Well, of course, movies are visual arts, but like maybe dance or literature. So maybe a little bit exploring outside of the visual art field somehow. And but yeah, through the literature, I get a lot of inspiration, and I sometimes even might be reading a theory book, and there's a sentence or a word that just triggers something, and then it kind of evokes this kind of inspiration that I need to find more. I need to search more. Okay, this is super interesting. I need to dig deeper. So somehow I really, really love these moments when you are reading that somehow you want to know more, and it can get triggered by a one sentence or a word even.
What would be some defining book for you?
Whew. Well,
that is a hard question. That made the change somehow, or like, or a strong reaction.
I don't know if I do want to just name one. It's so
you can name a few. Yes, it's okay.
It's super hard. A book that is right now, I'm finding it very interesting, is The Structures of Protection, which is a book about refugee shelters. And it's really concentrating on this kind of idea, what kind of shelters are have been. It's quite heavily focused on the immigration crisis, which happened in 2015. Of course, it doesn't include that much of the immigration situation like with Ukraine, but especially concentrating, the book was created before. And it's very interesting, like how it kind of scrutinizes different kind of structures of protection, but like how important it is even for a very basic shelter to have some home-likeness or home-like characteristics in it, so that somehow you really start to think the importance again of the home. And also like how also like even if you don't have, let's say that there's also topics of like when you don't have a shelter, so basically you are somewhere outside, so even how there people need to create like a space that is somehow a gathering point or a point where you can 12 or where you can sleep, even though it's very unsafe space. But at the same time, people really have this need to create some sort of a sense of home or belonging, even if it's just a rock in the middle of the forest or like a place that you can somehow decide that this is a place where we can gather. And I think that's something that we also like a crisis beside, but even as kids, I think people do use their imagination to decide. As a kids, you have place where you decide that, okay, this is, let's imagine that this is our home or this is our space, so let's meet up there. So I think it's very important somehow to have this kind of places of shelter or belonging somehow.
We were constantly building some sort of a house when we were kids, like under a tree or something.
And even when we travel, like I feel we do have this need to somehow find a base that can work as a place to rest and place to, at least for a moment, feel safe. So I think it's a very important notion when you think about the shelter. So maybe I'm just picking up a book that I'm just recently reading, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, well, of course, it's very close to the mind as well, if you are taking time to research that, for sure.
I guess like it's the same. I always get this like a total emptiness when someone asks like, what is your favorite movie or what is your favorite book or favorite band? I'm like,
I don't know. Favorite is such a yeah. I'm also like that a little bit. That's why I was saying like something that made a big impression, because of course favorite you have different favorites throughout time, and what's your memories about your favorites? Yeah, it's another thing. So speaking of favorites, what are some of the artists that have been
influencing me?
What have been interesting to you?
Yep, absolutely. I really love the work of a Colombian artist, Doris Salguero. She's working a lot with this kind of loss and mourning and trauma, with a very kind of delicate sculptural installation through the sculptures and installations. And I mean, maybe when I was younger, I really loved Louise Bourgeois. So she was really like kind of a idol for me when I was a younger student. But maybe now Doris Salguero is still one of the artists that I really do appreciate and admire. Maybe Susan Hiller as well. She's this kind of a UK-based artist who is like using a lot of archives. And she's very interested in this kind of found objects and narratives that they can evoke and how they can be gathered and accumulated and somehow to create a new narrative or pseudo-archive. So I really like this kind of artists who are somehow working as well with the archives and this storytelling way. So at least those two, I would say, that have been with me for quite a long time.
I think you have works that have incorporated some sort of old material, other material, like found photographs and stuff. Do you collect things?
I do.
Archives.
Yeah, and I quite often archives are working as a starting point for my artworks. And it's not just photographs, but I feel it can be also like stories that I hear or also found objects and or places that have a history that I feel that place can be an archive as well. So I do work vastly with archives, but not just my own or my family archives. I also gather a lot of archives from flea markets. Also, I use digital archives. So I gather material from very different sources and I like to mix them together. So I kind of like to also confuse or question whose narrative are we talking about. And in general, like who has the power to tell the story or create the archive and whose voice is heard, or like it's always this kind of structures of power as well, like who is accumulating the archives and who decides what is worth preserving somehow.
I mean, in that case, I guess it's you who is telling the story.
Yeah.
At some point in my practice, I was briefly interested in that. I found on a couple of occasions in those Roskalava containers that people throw a lot of stuff. There were these like bunch of photos and documents, but then for some reason I decided that I don't want to go on that, because that's a road in itself. Just
absolutely,
working with archives, it's a big endeavor in itself.
And I guess like there's always this kind of a question of appropriation. So you need to be somehow aware of whose archives you are using and how you use it. And of course, it's this kind of a balance or negotiation that you go through with yourself. That is it okay to use these archives? Or you have a lot of like images of random people and like their private lives somehow, but of course because they were thrown away, or I found them from the flea market or from the trash or whatever, or from the street. So of course they are for scraps, but at the same time they are still someone's private life. So it's also interesting like in what way to use the archive for your own needs. Of course it's quite a power play again in some way.
Oh, maybe lastly we can go back to the inspiration. Are there some other places of inspiration for you?
Besides literature and movies and places like that. Of course, like I do get inspired by traveling, for example. I feel that like different places trigger or inspire or bring different kind of ways to see the surroundings, but also yourself. And like reflect somehow. They always bring something new and new ideas when you are kind of detached from the normal everyday life that you have here in Helsinki. And when I say traveling, it can be even inside Finland, maybe going to up north or somewhere else, but it can be abroad as well. But I think that's always been very inspiring and important for me to somehow throw myself to some other place that is not familiar for me. So it's good to also somehow sometimes leave the everyday routines and like just disrupt that kind of a flow and set yourself somewhere else where everything is new. So I think that's a very important part of the...
It's definitely very refreshing to just restart what is in front of your eyes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this talk.
Thank you.
And good luck with the project.
Thank you.